Good morning. Good morning. Um, Today is day 83, and I couldn't help it, but we're still going to continue on God's presence. I can't help it. Um, so hopefully tomorrow I'll talk into the different types of praise, um, which is really the different types of praise. There's seven um, that I came across, and there's nothing really different really about the types. It's kind of like a progression from I guess level one praise and like level seven praise, if that makes sense. So I don't know. We'll see what I do tomorrow. But we're gonna go ahead and continue off from where I left off yesterday. So we talked about God's presence, and again, just an overall recap. Um, our environment as man, it is to dwell in the presence of God. That is our environment. The same way that the fish have the sea and the beasts of the earth have the literal land in the earth. Good morning, Kim. Um, yeah. And the birds have the air. We have the presence of God. That is where our environment is. That is where we function. That's where we thrive. If we live anywhere outside of the presence of God, in any time, any moment, we are dysfunctioning. So, and how we get back into God's presence is that we create an environment for Him to come to us. We make room for Him, and that is through praise and worship. Um, so, yesterday we talked about how God's presence brings joy. God's presence gives rest from your work. Not literally per se, but it more so makes your work very effortless. It makes your work very easy. It can make your work very pleasurable. Also, it'll make your work, God is working with you in your work, if that makes any sense. You're not toiling, you're not slaving over anything. God is working with you if He's not doing it all for you. So today we are going to continue on that thread and talk about how God's presence brings peace. And I'm going to read Mark chapter 4, starting at verse 35, ending at verse 40. So Mark 4, 35 through 40. As evening came, Jesus said to His disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. And I thought that was very interesting. I never noticed that in the New Living Translation, that other boats followed Christ across the sea, or across the lake. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the wave, "Silence," or peace, "be still." Suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" So I'm pretty sure that at this point, before they woke Jesus up, that they were panicking. They were in full panic mode. And this kind of relates to also God bringing rest. They were in full panic mode. They were working very hard to get the water out of the boat. They were working very hard to keep the boat afloat. Hey, Mom. They were working very hard to get the boat, to keep the boat afloat. um, and they were working very hard to survive. They were working very hard. And it was filling with water. And probably when they realized that they couldn't do it on their own, when they realized that they were failing at their own attempts, that's when they started to ask for Christ. And I also segue that to encourage you guys not to use or to call on God at the very last minute, or to use God as that spare tire, or to use God only when you need Him, or to call on God only when you need Him. Always invite Him into everything that you do, no matter how small it is. It could be something as simple as picking vacation. And I know that may be a bit, I guess, religious or a bit deep or a bit too much. But why not? You never know. But anyway, so the disciples were working hard in that storm. Once they finally got to Him and realized that they couldn't do it without Him, Jesus pretty much wasn't panicking at the moment at all. Jesus, on the other hand, only said 3 short words to the storm: "Silence," or "Peace, be still." He didn't bail water out. He didn't shout commands at the people. He just simply spoke those 3 words, "Peace, be still." So God's presence, bringing it back to the topic at hand, God's presence will bring peace and calmness in your life. Now, that does not mean, of course, that, things will fix immediately or suddenly, although they can. God can do anything he wants. But 9 times out of 10, for your growth's sake, for your maturity's sake, you will kind of be like in the eye of the storm. Although things are going crazy around you, where you are, God will have peace. There will be peace. I'm sorry. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything will be perfect and quiet, but that you're not worried about anything. That's the key thing. So don't think it's strange as well that when because you have the presence of God in your life, because you practice God's presence on a daily, because God's presence is not foreign to you, don't think it's strange that certain people who don't have peace, they're all of a sudden drawing nearer to you. And it's not really you, but it's the God in you, the peace in you. Shalom, Jehovah Shalom. So again, don't think it's strange that certain people who don't have peace seem to be attracted to you or start to cling to you. You have something they need, so introduce God's presence to them. So if you find yourself always in chaos, things seem to always be going wrong, maybe you are the one to invite God in it so that there will be peace. You are a peacemaker. And the way to have or to invite God's presence into a chaotic situation is to make room for him. Blessed are the peacemakers. And just a side note, as far as attracting, I guess I call them the troubled ones or whatever, attracting those kind of people, it's not so necessarily where their chaos and their mess will overflow into yours, but rather the God's presence in your life will overflow into theirs. So that's why, this has been happening to me ever since a kid, since I got saved. And I'm always attracting those who need God's peace. They are hyper anxious. They are worried about everything, borderline paranoid. They drain the energy out of me sometimes. But I know if I stay in God's presence and I maintain my connection with him, they won't drain me. And a little bit of God's peace will kind of overflow into theirs, and they start to ask me questions. How are you so peaceful? How are you so calm? They'll see the difference. They'll see the God active in my life, the God of peace active in my life. And now, a little side note, as I was typing my notes yesterday, I had to stop and think real quick as far as deliverance. I always wondered if God's peace and also God's rest can also overflow into deliverance. Because I know that's the area that God has called me in, and I always wonder about those. From what I've gathered, and I have not actively done it myself, not yet anyways, but I've always heard that a deliverance session, casting out demons, for those of you who don't know, usually takes 20 minutes, maybe up to an hour on a normal situation. I stress normal situation. That's average. However, I'm also hearing these horror stories where it would take longer than that, hours, to cast out a demon in a normal situation. So I wonder, though, if the person, the deliverer that God is using, I wonder if the deliverer would spend more time in God's presence, would they have to work as hard to assist somebody in their deliverance? Does it have to take hours upon hours for somebody's deliverance to take place? Why? I always wonder how we can never, I guess, of course we're not God, but I still think that we could still operate in the same vein as he did, especially if we are his children, especially if we are to emulate Christ. Why can't we speak the words, peace be still, and then immediately the spirit leaves? Granted, I know that, we're not literally Christ on earth, but we are representatives of him. We do carry the same spirit. We do carry the same power in him. So it's just a little side note, because I'm thinking when I get into deliverance, I don't have time for that. I don't. So just something that's just a thought that's kind of floating in my head. I wonder again if deliverers, if the people that God used in deliverance, if they would spend more time in his presence and master his presence, how much more effective they would be in deliverance. And lastly, God's presence attracts the right people. Exodus chapter 33, starting at verse 15. And then at verse 16, then Moses said, if you don't personally go with us, don't ask us to leave this place. How will anyone know that you look favorably on me and your people, if you don't go with us? For your presence among us sets your people and me apart from all other people on earth. And reading a quote from Dr. Miles Monroe from his book, Rediscovering the Purpose and Power of Praise and Worship. People are attracted to us because they are attracted to God. Your life should be so distinguished. Your life should be distinguished because God hangs out with you. When God is with you, people are drawn to you and they don't know why. Hey, so it should be like we should be like kind of like one of those bug zappers in the night out in the country. You know, those lamps that people hang out and outside of their homes, and the bugs are just drawn and mesmerized by the light. They don't know what's happening. They don't care what's going on around them. They just know they need to get to the light. That's how we are supposed to be for those who don't know Christ, for those who need peace, for those who need rest, for those who need joy, because God's presence is around us, because God's presence is kind of like a garment on us. They're supposed to be drawn to us. Not only that, but God's presence is also attracts divine. God's presence also attracts people that we are connected to, and the opposite is true as well. God's presence will repel the wrong people in your life. For those people who are in your life, for those people that are in your life that don't have the right motive, who are just around you for whatever reason, but you know they're not God's will for your life. God's presence will also repel. That has happened to me too, especially throughout my childhood, because I wanted to hook up with a certain group of friends, but because I was peculiar, because I was distinguished and set apart, they didn't really want to connect with me like that. So God's presence will clean your house and space so that people who aren't supposed to be in your life will leave. Because, again, unfortunately, we do have people who have wrong motives and or who will lead us astray. And I thought I was done, but I have one more. God's presence, of course, we all know this, brings blessings. To receive the blessings of God is to receive anything and everything you need to fulfill your life. It is absolutely true when it says everything you need is in God's presence. That's not over-exaggerating. And I'm reading off my notes real quick. And not all of God's blessings are material things. Prosperity has a vast meaning, and it doesn't implicate only physical blessings like cars, clothes, money. God's prosperity, God's blessing is whole and complete. So it wouldn't make sense that God will bless you with $3 million, but your body is ridden with diseases. That makes absolutely no sense at all. It wouldn't make sense that God will bless you with your spouse, but right now you are a hot, emotional, dysfunctional mess. God would not do that. His blessings are whole. His blessings are complete. God's blessings are the complete package. So that is it. I think I'm done with God's presence, although I still see I have a whole lot of notes. 9 times out of 10, I may start the year out teaching about God's presence, because this is a topic where I believe that if there were more teachings on the benefits of God's presence and what God's presence will do for somebody, I really do think that our hunger and our thirst for God would kind of amp up a bit. My opinion, though. But we'll see. I don't know. So that is it that I have today. I'm at my 15-minute mark. I got to get to work. So God's presence brings joy, brings rest, brings peace, attracts the right people, brings blessings, and I will save the rest for another time. So if you find yourself lacking in any of these areas, seek God's presence. Practice God's presence on a daily. And again, you do that through praise and worship. And tomorrow, I promise, I will go through the specifics on praise. But I do want to add that praise and worship is a personal thing. So what I cover tomorrow, you kind of have to find your own flavor or find your own style of praise and worship. Although, I'll talk about that tomorrow. But anyway. So that is all that I have today. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about, the 7 types of praise and how to utilize those. And that is it. And then on Saturday I will talk about worship, which will be a little bit difficult for me to do because, praise and worship they're different, but for the most part I kind of covered worship a little bit. But we'll see. But I'll see you guys tomorrow at 7 a.m. Central. I pray you guys have a blessed Thursday, and I will see you guys then. Bye.